here's another countdown from me. The top 10 games that I love and hate. Games that are downright enjoyable, but have a lot of glaring issues that can prevent you from enjoying it as much as you wanted to. There will be spoilers that'll have to be brought up to prove my point, so if you're not okay with that, read the subtitle to see where you should skip to where the spoilers end. Also, there are some entries on the list that a lot of people praise, so this list might get controversial at times. I asked some people for help with the script, so hopefully this won't be as much of a train wreck as some of my previous countdowns. Nothing else here, so time to start the show. I don't hate Star Fox Assault as much as other people do, but I do think Assault has quite a few things that could have been handled better. What's my problem with it? The controls? I don't find them that bad. The land missions? I don't use lack of nostalgia as a reason to hate a game. It's also being able to access your R-Wing and Landmaster from the battlefield. If only we could use this to its full potential, but Assault is only 10 levels long, making it too short. I know it's a Star Fox game, but Star Fox 64 had different branching pathways giving it more levels. The voice acting sounds rather forced. A lot of times it sounds like they're saying these lines as they're being dragged out of bed. Though to be fair, the music and graphics are surprisingly nice, and tracking them to targets feels so satisfying. And it even references Star Fox Adventures with Soria being one of the levels in the game. While I wasn't the big Star Fox Adventures fan, it was a nice throwback. There's not really much else to say without amounting to pointless padding. It's a fun game, but I can't tell if I like it better than 64 or not. Remember what I said last year? Darn this final boss, darn this finale, and darn this game! Come to think of it, I had a lot of good memories of the Game Boy Advance port of Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban, collecting the cards, leveling up my spells, and analyzing the enemies. I still have some hatred towards the game. For example, how ugly the characters' designs look compared to their movie counterparts. Ron looks like he's about to throw up, but worst of all is Snape. His face looks like he's got all of his blood sucked out of him. I know there are limitations, but at the very least try! On to the next problem. Some enemies can deal more damage than your strongest potions can heal, so you have to take all of your turns to heal the amount of health you need, turning this into a long cycle of healing, taking damage, and waiting for your opponents to miss before you can safely attack. There are several plot points that leave you with a confused look on your face if you don't remember how the plot twists were in the movie. Let me show you a lovely example of this. After you get attacked by the Dementors near the lake, Harry just randomly says, "Dad." You see, in the movie he was saved by someone who Harry thought was his father. Here, the closest we get to an explanation is when Harry says he mistook himself for his father, so he won't know what the purpose of that scene was until we remember that from the movie. That being said, it made me appreciate the Harry Potter series even more because it has surprisingly great graphics for a Game Boy Advance game if you ignore the ugly character models. The puzzles are fun to go through with the ability to use some spells in the field. The music is pretty good. Exploring the Hogwarts castle is a ton of fun. And I got a big kick out of analyzing the enemies with Informus. Maybe I wouldn't have stuff to praise about it if I didn't grow up with it, because though playing it nowadays, it's aged very poorly for a Game Boy Advance game, but it made me love the Harry Potter franchise even more, and it's not because I prefer the movies in comparison. It's a very stupid game at times, but I can't really bring myself to say I don't like it. Animal Crossing New Leaf. How much fun you're going to have going around and customizing your town, buying whatever outfit you want, buying decorations to expand your house, put whatever decorations you want in it, change the wallpaper, and my favorite part, going out to catch bugs, fish, and fossils, and bringing them to the museum. So what exactly is wrong with this? Well, that's pretty much all you do in this game. That's pretty much all you do in any Animal Crossing game. It's fun for me at first, but it quickly lost its luster. Games where you do the same thing throughout the whole game are just not my style. So why did I put this on the list and not the other Animal Crossing games? Because the only other one I've played was the original, and I have more things to praise in New Leaf, but also more things to complain about. Guess how New Leaf starts out? By having you be mistaken for the job of something important when it was meant to be someone else's job, who probably would have taken his job more seriously. Yeah, that hasn't been done like a million times already. On the bright side, You don't have to go to your house in order to save, and grinding up on money won't take as long, but I still find it unbearably repetitive. I know that you have to do something like this when you have a job, but this is not what I bought a video game to do. You also go to Tortimer Island once you progress far enough. That's a very cool change of scenery, but there are two annoyances about it. First off, how you get there. You see, you must use Captain's boat in order to get there, and when you're using his boat, it triggers a cutscene of him singing. I like his singing, but it gets very annoying after going back and forth several times for how long the cutscene is. You have the option to skip it, but if you do that, he'll make you feel like a terrible human being for doing so. Well, that's how I felt. It's either sit through a long cutscene or feel like a much bigger jerk than you really are. Captain is a lovable character, but just because I like his singing doesn't mean I want him to slow down the boat just to sing every time and make me feel terrible for wanting to get to the island right away. And you can't save on Tortimer Island, so if you're running out of power and don't have an outlet near you when you have to turn your game off, you'll lose your save progress. Thank goodness Mr. Rossetti will let you explain why your game turned off, so that's not as bad as it could have been. There are some fun stuff you can do in the holidays, but those only happen like twice a month, so that takes away from the variety. I had some fun times with the game until it started to feel like the same thing every day. I'm glad I played it, but I'm not much of an Animal Crossing fan. If you haven't already guessed, I decided not to get Happy Home Designer. I'm really sorry, everyone. I truly apologize for the video quality in this entry, because the best quality footage I could find either had watermarks or black bars in them. So I had to settle for whatever I could find. Paper Mario: The Thousand Year Door is one of my favorite Mario RPG games, second only to Partners in Time. It would have been my favorite if it weren't for some things that greatly hinder it. But wait, if it's my second favorite Mario RPG game, why does it qualify for the list? Because even though I adore the game, it has so many flaws that make me forget why I even like it in the first place. Thousand Year Door's visuals are amazing how they use the paper gimmick to great extents, with the neat abilities of gliding as a paper airplane and turning into a sailboat. It also has interludes just like the first game, and this time Peach doesn't get caught at the end of the interludes. That's an improvement. Bowser's interludes make me laugh very hard, but didn't really serve much of a point in the regular story. Still make me laugh, and the stage mechanic gives you a motivation because when you do good in battle, everyone will be cheering for you to win. But sometimes things can randomly fall on you and mess you up. Sometimes it gives warning signs, but other times it doesn't. Thankfully, it has music that's about as great as the original Paper Mario, with songs like Petal Meadows, the final boss theme, and my personal favorite, the We're Rooting for Your Mario theme. Thousand Year Door has some good jokes in it, but sometimes they seem like they're trying a little too hard. And sometimes they seem like they're not even trying at all. Especially having to sit through a speech bubble with the words, "I love you," 100 times, and having to constantly jump on General White to wake him up when most people would just turn around and think that they're not supposed to do that. Breaking gameplay just to make a joke is about as funny as watching Squidward's toenail get ripped off. And there's so much backtracking. And by that, I mean in every single chapter. I didn't hate the General White mission as much as the others because there are warp pipes to keep that from being as bad, but having to go all the way through Keel Hall Key and back to retrieve a wedding ring right when you thought you were rid of that island. But for me, the worst one is Chapter 4, where you spend half the chapter walking back and forth between Twilight Town and Creepy Steeple. Well, the path between them takes about 5 minutes. And that's if you don't count having to fight the same respawning enemies. Though I adore all the good memories it brings me of playing it, sometimes it's hard to remember the good times because the bad memories keep getting in the way. But when I ignore all of these, it reminds me that I truly do love this amazing game. Now it's time to talk about F-Zero GX. First, there's the epic music with songs like Sand Ocean and Fire Field to name a couple. And the tracks are outstanding. I mean, look at the mind-blowing scenery of Fire Field and how the track splits through the middle of another track of a green forest. So fun going at unimaginable speeds. However, this can also make the experience very unforgiving. If you boost too much, you might accidentally blow yourself off the track and die. Speaking of that, once that happens, they shove one of the most ear-bleeding game over themes I've ever heard through your eardrums. Trust me when I say that you will be hearing that annoying game over sound quite a lot due to this game's difficulty. The story is a huge one more try moment for me because it has some challenges. How are they? Try mixing a "wow, this is very formidable" reaction with an "I hate this so much" reaction. We have missions like racing in a canyon with sharp turns and falling boulders where your opponent drives the track perfectly, trying to destroy another racer's car before he wins the race while being swarmed by tons of other cars, and going through a long skinny highway without slowing down or crashing into the wall. How is anyone supposed to do that? But I like GX more than I hate it, because of how good F-Zero GX is. I can see why a lot of people love Splatoon, and it's not a bad game in any way, but let me go over my problems with it. The first problem I have with Splatoon is that every time you start up your game, you have to view the Inkopolis news before you can continue. I'll admit Callie and Marie aren't bad as characters, but it's a huge annoyance to have to see the cutscene every time you load up your save data. It's not so bad at first, but when it happens every time is where I draw the line, because it gets monotonous and repetitive really fast. Notifications are a thing, people. Learn how to use them. The graphics are pretty nice. It is fun coding the levels in paint, especially using it to climb walls and even swim in the paint to avoid certain enemies and travel at high speeds. And it has some really good puzzles in it with its uses of certain obstacles like sponges and invisible platforms. But some of the levels kind of feel like they're the same level with different layouts. Especially with the ones that seem like they were designed for multiplayer but not for single player, making it feel more like a get to the other side of the map objective than an objective of getting past all the challenges that the stage has to offer. As for the music, it can be either good or bad. They can be as awesome as Octoling Assault for how intense and catchy it is, or they can be as irritating as Rise of the Octotroopers, which sounds like they just recorded a burping sound and dubstepped it. The online mode is pretty fun though because you're put in teams of who can paint the level the most in a certain color. But it also gets somewhat repetitive after a while, since there aren't a lot of stages to play on. It doesn't have enough online modes to keep the matches feeling fresh either. Plus, you can't switch weapons when you're in the lobby. Splatoon is a good game because of the interesting style to it, but I think the gameplay choices can get very tedious at times. Yes, I said it. I have some problems with Fire Emblem Awakening. Is it a bad game? No. But I'm not going to praise it so much that I'm going to forget about all the other great games in the series like everyone else does. I know someone's going to form an angry mob at me for saying this, but the storyline is in my mind one of the cheesiest stories I've ever seen in a video game. If you don't get Chrom married by a certain point in the game, the scene where Chrom gets married will come straight out of nowhere, and the quote-unquote plot twist where Marth turns out to not be Marth was painfully obvious. Not only because of Lucina being in Smash 4 was a year after Awakening, but because she doesn't even try to disguise her voice. Well, the plot twist of who she really was is actually kind of surprising, and I find the villain to be very unoriginal. He's an evil demon that is being resurrected. I can come up with a ton of examples of times where this has been done. Well, one thing that's interesting, if Chrom kills it, it gets sealed away for another millennium, but if your avatar kills it, he will permanently die, but your avatar will no longer exist. That's quite cool. Oh wait, you end up being revived anyways because of the powers of friendship. You're kidding, right? The scene is actually somewhat heartwarming, but the plot point itself, no. Though there still were some pretty intense moments in the game. So what do I like about Awakening? The gameplay. It's got the same battle system we love. Support conversations are nice because if a certain character gets married, you unlock optional characters and new units. The pair-up system, while not very unique, is fun to use and can make Awakening more interesting, and makes leveling up weaker units no longer a nightmare. Thank goodness for that. In casual mode, your characters come back whether they're killed or not, which makes it fairer than other Fire Emblem games. If you want it to be more of a challenge, then just raise the difficulty. The music is also great to listen to, but doesn't inspire me as much as the other Fire Emblem games' music like For Liberty, Determination, or Clash from Path of Radiance. And the maps are lacking because a lot of them are just wide open spaces and not as creative as some of the maps in the other Fire Emblem games. It does put more emphasis on the characters than some of the other Fire Emblem games do. So, my thoughts on Fire Emblem Awakening? I love it for the gameplay, but the incredibly cheesy storyline is very hard to get past. Kingdom Hearts Dream Drop Distance has a lot of things that I get a lot of fun out of doing. I am astounded by some of the gimmicks like swinging around lampposts and riding on railings. And when you have the ability to ricochet off walls, you'll be on top of the world, both literally and figuratively. And the graphics are beautiful, notably in the Symphony of Sorcery. Then there's the reality shifts which change for each world, hacking into enemies' data to damage them, beating up enemies in a comic-like effect, and having both characters wield a big keyblade at once. But then again, it didn't do everything it could do. When we saw the new Hunchback world, I was expecting that we'd get multiple different Disney worlds, like a Tangled world or a Brave world. But the Hunchback world was the only new world we got. A Brave world would be nice to celebrate how it was a very recent Disney movie at the time. Well, at least we have Tangled and Kingdom Hearts 3. The other four were a second Pinocchio world, a second Tron world, and 2 more Mickey Mouse worlds, which we already have 3 of before Dream Drop Distance. And instead of Heartless, we have stuffed animals as enemies. Oh no! A giant teddy bear! How threatening! And we have some of them as party members instead of actual Disney party members. In Kingdom Hearts 2, we got to team up with a beast, a martial artist, and a lion. Here, we get plush toys as our party members. Well, their linked abilities are interesting. My next problem contains spoilers, so I'm gonna put a subtitle saying where to skip to if you don't want anything spoiled. That problem is the organization's new motivation. The real goal was to create 13 Xehanort. Yeah, if you think that sounds stupid, it's just as stupid as it sounds. Dream Drop Distance is good, but not exactly up there with my favorite games in the series. I enjoy Pokémon Generation 6, but I kinda prefer Generation 5's music and visuals because of how beautiful everything looked. X and Y still do some stuff with its camera angles, but the only time I can remember them doing anything amazing with them outside of the cutscenes is in Lumio City. Now to talk about the generation itself. After 14 years, we finally get another type, the Fairy type. Now Steel and Poison attacks have more use, since now they're more useful for type coverage. And yes, I'll address the elephant in the room. They're also super effective against Dragon types, making them not as cheap as they used to be. The Mega Evolutions redeemed some Pokemon like Beedrill, but they gave some Mega Evolutions to Pokemon that should have had actual evolutions first, like Audino for example. Its full potential hadn't been explored yet, and it's quite unlikely that 2 members in an evolutionary line will each get Megas, so now some weaker Pokemon that should have had real evolutions won't be able to get any more evolutions, and at their very strongest are barely a matchup against most other Mega Evolved Pokemon. And I honestly preferred it when Arceus was the strongest Pokemon because of being the god of all Pokemon. It made more sense than something man-made being the strongest Pokemon. While we're at it, let's talk about how X and Y were. I love the Kalos region for how massive it is, but the villain was one of the most obvious villains I've ever seen. They don't do much to hide his true nature. He's first seen making that "make a world better place" speech. You know, the same one that almost every Pokemon villain does, and how you meet him very close to the time you meet Team Flare. His motivation is that he wants to make the world a better place by causing humans to go extinct. How unoriginal can you get? Viridian and King Fury had this exact same motivation, just to name a few. And there isn't much of an aftergame. The previous 2 generations had a whole new set of areas to explore. Even Fire Red and Leaf Green did this. The only new things that really stick out to me are 1 new town and the Looker side quests. But it did bring in some new awesome Pokemon. Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire were also great games, and I prefer them over X and Y because of how much memories they bring back and how it largely enhances the graphics. It was very necessary of them to bring new evolutions to old Pokemon into the Hoenn decks. They made some good and bad decisions with the new Hoenn region, but I'll only name a couple of them because I don't want this segment to be longer than it already is. I am amazed by how they enhanced Mauville City by making it a giant shopping mall. It feels very powerful what they did with the abandoned ship, now known as Sea Mauville, because of how mysterious the atmosphere is, and it feels like I'm in the ruins of the Titanic. I hate how they downgraded Route 113 because now you run in piles of soot instead of collecting it in the grass, which I had more fun with. The trick houses now have barely any trainers, and there are only 6 trick house puzzles. It doesn't take advantage of its 3D camera angles outside of cutscenes, and your rival will keep interrupting your game every time you get to a certain route. Because of Heart Gold and Soul Silver bringing in a lot of the elements from Crystal, I expected these games to bring in the best parts of Emerald. But no! They don't have the ability to trigger a double battle by getting seen by 2 trainers at once. They for some stupid reason won't let you rematch gym leaders, and they removed the battle frontier. and that statue was intended to reminisce it, but only felt like a slap to the face. It would have been awesome seeing the Frontier Brains with Gen 4, 5, and 6 Pokemon. If you think I'm nitpicking here, the reason why this bugs me so much is because this is their only chance of making a modernized Gen 3 remake. The Delta episode was fun, but I wanted actual elements. Overall, these are great games, but I'd much rather have it not come out until now because of what more could have been brought. Shadow of the Colossus. I love the idea and art direction of Shadow of the Colossus. I just don't like the game itself. In Shadow of the Colossus, you play as someone named Wander who wants to resurrect a girl named Mono. A spirit named Dorman tells him that he needs to kill all 16 of the Colossi on the Forbidden Lands in order to rescue her. The quest works really well in context of art because it gives you a sense of depression and a sense of guilt. In one of the rare times where making you feel terrible for playing a game actually helps the experience instead of hindering it. And the overworld is beautiful. I can clearly see why they didn't have enemies in the overworld because Team Eco didn't want to ruin the mood. What does ruin the mood is that the overworld takes like 15 minutes and makes it seem like I'm doing the same thing for 15 minutes with nothing else to it. Except maybe stopping to shoot a few lizards and getting a couple pieces of fruit. This is worse with Aggro's controls. Trying to control your horse to get it to go in the right direction is so frustrating. Yes, I know that it can mess you up unless you're fighting a boss, but that doesn't mean anything when spending so much time getting aggro to go in the right direction, which can make this take longer than it's supposed to be, making it more redundant. The boss fights are intended to be set up greatly because of how large scale they are. The ways of discovering their weak points are very interesting. It's too bad that some can take forever to beat. I find it to be really, really, really repetitive. If this were a giant painting or a movie, I probably would have loved it to its fullest. Shadow of the Colossus, overall, is a very emotional and artistic, but a very boring and repetitive experience for me. I love it as an art form, but I hate it as a game, making it my #1 game that I both love and hate. Thank you all for watching. If you have any advice, leave it in the comment section below, and I will see you all in my next countdown.
Oh, there's a big surprise! That's an incredible... I think I'm gonna have a heart attack and die from that surprise!